A growing number of actors are finding that creating their own content is a front-footed approach to advancing their career. It can be a one-person play or on-camera YouTube short film. It really doesn't matter, because it really is a matter of good writing for the right venue and the energy, desire, and skill to see it through. Let's check out ways many actors are finding success in creating their own content on this episode of Casting Actors Cast.
It's time for another episode of Casting Actors Cast. Here he is, your host, Jeffrey Dreisbach.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Casting Actors Cast. I'm casting partner Jeffrey Dreisbach with the McCorkle Group in New York. How are you? Hope you're having a good day. Welcome to this episode. I think this has been a long time coming. Actually, I wanted to do this episode for a long time, and today is the day where I get to talk about actors who are working and producing their own content just to keep themselves fresh and moving forward in their career. But first, this is that moment of the podcast where I simply get to say thank you for tuning in to Casting Actors Cast. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to bring this information to you. I started this podcast almost 4 years ago now, and I haven't had a moment to think about whether or not it's been anything but fun. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for being there. Listen, I suggest you go to the website if you haven't done so already, castingactorscast.com. And there you're going to find some information about the podcast. There's a place where you can find out a little bit more about classes I might be teaching. But there's also a form right there on the landing page that says dive into the talent pool. If you fill out that form, that will open up some freebies for you. One is a book on doing voiceover work. The other is a video that I wrote called Casting Secrets, What They Don't Tell You. I performed this video on YouTube. It's a private video. No one else has access to it except for those people who fill out that form. Now, additionally, on the website, you're going to find Jeff's Jots, which are corresponding show notes in the form of a blog that match the episodes. So if you want this additional information that I'm talking to you about, perhaps having a single page piece of paper on a PDF that can tell you and give you the show information, if you find that useful, then have that. It is absolutely all yours. All an effort to try and bring this community of talented folks together and to sort of dispel some of those myths about casting and actors trying to find jobs and trying to be better in the industry and to try and make it work for themselves. So that's what I'm trying to do, is just offer as much help and guidance as I possibly can. Now, speaking of opportunities, here's one I'd like to share with you, and that is happening on May 25th, from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. at Pearl Studios. That's 500 8th Avenue, from 6:30 to 7:30. You are invited because of the invitation of Actors Connection. They are allowing me to do a live broadcast recording of this very podcast. Isn't that cool? So happening from 6:30 to 7:30, it's a 1 hour. You and I will have a chance. We'll answer some questions from the audience, but you'll actually see me doing the podcast recording right there. It's kind of a cool new thing. I've never done anything like this before, and so I hope that it's kind of fun. But Actors Connection is now joined up with Pearl Studios. If you don't know Pearl Studios and you're not in the New York area, then you should know that Pearl Studios is one of the major rehearsal studios in New York City, where they rehearse many Broadway shows and many auditions. And our office uses Pearl Studios just extensively, almost exclusively. And so it's a really great place. If you haven't been there, you should check it out. If you're in the area on the 25th, it would be so cool to have you there at this live broadcast. I'll be giving you more information as I get it, as I start piecing together what the heck am I going to do in a live show. So this should be kind of fun. Finally, my shout out to Actors Connection, actorsconnection.com/New York. They're doing a really amazing job, and they've just been great doing their online workshops, classes, seminars, and they're now slowly coming back to doing some live stuff as well at Pearl Studios. But listen, if you're out of town, but you really want to be working with some professionals currently working in the industry, actorsconnection.com/New York has an entire offering of people in the industry that you can be working with right now. I'm happy to say that on occasion I get invited, and when I have it in my schedule that I can do it, I love to come and teach at Actors Connection, so I invite you to check it out. This is my shout out to my good friends Colleen and Tony, and actorsconnection.com/New York. That's the housekeeping that I have to share with you today. But anyway, as you can tell, I'm probably a little overly excited about doing a live broadcast of this podcast because I'm just here in my studio doing these on a weekly basis. It would be really fun just to see how successful, or see if this turns out to be something that might be something we do in the future. Who knows? Anyway, let's jump into the subject at hand. And that is about writing your own material. That is about coming up with your own idea for a show. Preparing your own content is such a cool thing that is really in your scope of being able to do. It is not something that you might just kind of speculate about. Because of the technology and because of all of the offerings that are available right now, I think it's really worthwhile to seriously consider putting together some material that is just right for you. Now, it can be in many, many forms. And so the first step, or step number one, is simply finding the right story for you. What is the story that you want to tell? Now, perhaps it would be something along the lines of a historical figure. Maybe it would be a futuristic piece. Maybe it's a character that you've always wanted to play in history. Maybe it's telling the story of your life. Maybe it's a one-person show for the stage. It doesn't matter. The idea is really investigating and taking some time and finding out what would be the best cool story for me to tell. Now, the second thing that you have to do, of course, is figuring out the best medium for your story. Is this something that could be shot as a video series? Is there enough material to put an entire series together? Maybe it's just a short film. Maybe it's a one-person show starring you. So deciding the best medium really goes hand in hand with finding the best story for yourself. So perhaps, like I said, as I used earlier example, is somebody, a historical figure. Maybe you've had an affinity towards somebody. Maybe there's a story out there in your family's history that might be just a really cool story to tell, where you can actually play that family member. So, although it's really fun to think about, don't forget that it's also self-serving. It's also for you to get your performing chops together. It's also for you to have something to focus on, to work toward. That's what is so healthy about doing your own material. Your own story can make an impact on the world, literally. And so your own creative content is something that I encourage all actors to consider. Here's step number 3. Can you write it? Now, you might not think that you're a writer, and that's so fair. Not everybody can write dialogue. Not everybody can write stories. I get it. I understand. But let me just share this with you. First of all, you really don't know that you're not a writer until you try writing, and then you can make that decision. Don't make that decision before you start. Don't make that decision before you put pen to paper. You know what I'm saying? It makes so much sense if you do the research, put some ideas together, make an outline. You know, you've been to school. You know what this is all about. Come up with a way in which the story can be unique and interesting for you. Not only for you to write, but for you to be able to share. Now, if that is daunting, if that feels like, oh my God, that looks like way beyond something I'm capable of, then perhaps you can team up with a writer. Perhaps you have a best friend who loves writing. Perhaps you know somebody who's looking for material to write. Put the word out. Share the request for somebody to help you with this project. because you'll never know who's going to show up, who's going to be there to help you with that. But first, I think the default setting has to be for you to try it first. At the very least, you can take the time to do the research and to put the storyline together. That doesn't mean you have to write the whole thing. But once you have the storyline together, once you have an outline, once you have an idea about the story that's being told and where that story goes, then you can go ahead and team up with a writer. Also know that as you consider putting this together for yourself to determine if you can write it, please do yourself a huge favor. Keep it simple. Please remember that every good story has to have a good beginning, a good middle, and a good end. It has to have a complete through line of those three elements, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Don't start writing just from the beginning if you don't know where it's going to end up. Give yourself a little bit of structure, because that will give it the dramatic impact that could probably make a really excellent story for anybody to want to be a part of. Now, step number 4, I think it's important to realize the parameters that are needed to make it work. What are the limitations that you have when you are writing your own story? For example, there might be limitations that you go, gosh, this would be a great television series. Well, that's great, but can you write enough material to really make a series? Are there limitations in terms of your time? Are there limitations in terms of your ability to write? How much dedication are you willing to put into this as a new project for yourself? Are there limitations financially? It's really hard to just say, okay, I'm going to write it and then I'm going to become rich and famous. Please don't say that. So just understanding the parameters and giving yourself a structure just kind of makes sense, so that you don't just do what I know creative people love to do, which is put themselves 100% into a project at the expense of other areas of their life. Please make sure it's something that you can incorporate into your day-to-day existence, but keeping it fresh, keeping it interesting, and keeping it exciting, that's a great motivator. Step number 5, enlist others who can help you realize the project to completion. You see, it's one thing to have an idea, but an idea is only as good as the energy it takes to make it happen. Okay, somebody write that down, because that was really, really good. I'll repeat it in case you were, vacuuming the house. An idea is only as good as the energy it takes to make it happen. So it's one thing to come up with this cool thought about having a one-person show or a short film idea. It's another to start putting pen to paper, to really structure it out for yourself. And so you can enlist others. You can find other folks who might be able to contribute. Maybe there's somebody out there who loves to do research, or maybe there's somebody out there who, like I said earlier, loves to write. Maybe there's just somebody, a good friend, that you can bounce these ideas off of. Any of those suggestions can help you realize that project to its eventual goal, which is finishing it, getting the job done, putting it together, and making it come true. That's the thing I want to emphasize the most. Here's some additional thoughts to consider. And I did mention in terms of how much time and energy and money are you able to invest in your project. So that's something that I would really want you to spend a little bit of time on in your head. Make sure you understand that taking on something like that, I just don't want you to set yourself up for disappointment. I know this from my own personal life, that I get excited about a personal project, or I get excited about something to do, and I dream about it, and I do the research, and then it just kind of doesn't go the way I hope it does. And so instead of readjusting my goals and having a healthy perspective about what happened, I just decide to discard it completely. Now, I'm happy to say that at my age, I'm getting a little bit better at this. I'm able to see more projects to completion, thank goodness. But I just don't want that to be a habit or a pattern that you experience. And of course, in terms of money to invest in the project, I kind of think of it this way, that time is money, that an idea is free. but getting it implemented might cost you something. So be aware of whatever that cost factor might be. Here's another thought. You need to also incorporate into the process of putting together your own project the goal. What is the goal of actually jumping into this new project, this new idea, this new creative element? Is it to see it to production? Are you really interested in an ongoing creative endeavor? Is it something that you're going to spend some time in and then you're going to hopefully find somebody that might be interested in producing it? Maybe it's a college or a community college, or maybe it's a studio. Who knows? Or are you doing it just for fun? That's equally valid, by the way. Doing it just for fun, just to keep yourself fresh, just to keep yourself in the game, so to speak, is really healthy. And so there's no reason why you can't get the idea of developing your own project just for the fun of it. But my suggestion is that you make a plan with a deadline. Yes, a deadline. If you have an open-ended, I'm just going to start writing about this interesting story that I think I would be great to be acting in, you're going to find yourself getting, complacent. Ooh, good word. Very, very quickly. If you give yourself a deadline, setting small goals for yourself with an eventual conclusion in mind, you're going to stick to that plan much more easily, and you're going to find it much more creative for yourself. I've always felt, and this is contrary to what I used to think when I was in my 20s and 30s, but I used to think that if I gave too much structure to my creativity, that I was not going to be as creative. And you know what? I've discovered over time that the opposite is more true. If I give myself and surround my project with whatever I'm doing with a good, solid foundational structure, I find that the creativity within that structure is actually more enriched and more fulfilling. So make a plan with a deadline for yourself, then simply just stick to the plan. Here's another suggestion I'd like to make. This is only because of my own experience as well as I think about it. It's kind of hard to admit some of these things, you guys, but listen, don't promote your project to the entire universe until you feel you are ready. It's one thing to have an idea and then talk about, I'm writing this one-man show. It's all about the life and times of Buster Keaton. Unless I'm in a place to feel like it is ready for public consumption. Something about being able, it's like, you know what it is? It's like when somebody says, you know what, I just started a diet. And everyone goes, oh, good for you. That's great. You're starting a diet. As if to say that by promoting that you're on a diet, that somehow you're going to continue to feel more reinforced about the diet. When in fact, that's an additional pain down the road if you happen to not be able to follow through. Did you like that moment of silence just there? That sort of might ring true. It certainly rang true for me when I just said it. But please don't promote your project until you feel it's in a place to be promoted. It's important to not consider your project simply busy work, for example. If it's just something that I'm suggesting that you do for the fun of it, or it's just something to do because there's not enough going on in your world and you really are frustrated by your acting experience or lack thereof, this might not be the time to take on another project. On the other hand, if you see the value of starting your own project, of producing your own content, then you're going to feel like you can dedicate the time and the effort that is needed. In other words, what I'm trying to say is don't try to start your project until you have a plan, until you feel ready to be able to see it through. You see, it's important to remember that this is simply a way to stay creative, to stay motivated with your career. And when you can add this new project to your list of accomplishments to this point, then you know what? You're going to find you have found creative, amazing new ways to maintain confidence, to better understand the workings of the industry, and also to move forward with your creativity and not ever feel like you're spinning your wheels or you're stuck. Listen, I hope that this has been helpful for you. Please let me know if you found this useful. I would love to hear from some of you who've started your own project. Let me know what it is. I'm easy to get a hold of, by the way. CastingActorsCast, all one word, @gmail.com. And again, please don't forget to give me a like, a share, a thumbs up. It means the world to me, especially if you go to iTunes, because that's like the big deal for reviews. It would mean everything to me if you got something out of this podcast and are willing to share it. I'm Jeffrey Dreisbach. This is Casting Actors Cast.
Your support means the world to us, so please consider sharing, liking, and reviewing this episode wherever you jump in. I'm Megan Grace Martinez. Thanks.